So when learning Turkish, we hear a lot about all these vowels, the vowel harmony, the consonants that sometimes change, the D and the T. But there's a specific reason behind all this, and that's what we're going to explain today. So I think it's best to start with the vowels because these are the ones that actually experience that much change. And first we have our vowels A, E, O, U, and E, I, U. Now, I've put these in separate lines for a specific reason. I want you to try and pronounce the first line first. Okay? Now try to pronounce the second line, like individually, as in A, B, C, D, and so forth. Okay? Now let me try to pronounce first the first line. A, E, O, U. Second line. E, I, U. Let me repeat that once more. A, O, U. Second line. E, I, U. Now, to an extent, yes, I did kind of exaggerate a little bit when I was actually reading them, but this point still stands. As in, the top line here is the line of vowels that are, in a sense, deeper. They're called actually the thicker vowels in Turkish. And these are the ones that really come like from the back of your throat. As for the second row, the A, I, U, these are the more high-pitched ones. Now, as we've just mentioned, pitch, same thing happens with music. We want to try sometimes like have a specific pattern with pitches. And that's why in Turkish, when you are putting a vowel, you will usually find, even inside the same words, that the vowels will all be of the same group, as in they will all be those thicker or deeper vowels, or they will be the higher pitched ones. Additionally, there is an even more specific categorization. Let me do that. This time, I want you to look at my mouth. And this is actually incredibly important. This is one of the most important things when it comes to your pronunciation. First, I will pronounce the first pair, which is A, E. Second pair, O, U. Next, E, I. And then, U. Notice how in every pair, the shape of my mouth was pretty much the same, especially in this pair. This is actually an important pair here. E, I. This is kind of what will help you really get the difference between this E and this A. So once again, just like we always try to have these A, O, U in their own words and separate from the other group, we also want to sometimes have the combinations of the pairs as well if possible. And we will see that in the suffixes. And the important thing to point out is that if we are considering putting a suffix on, we will have two options. We will either use the A and E. These are the leaders of their groups, the deeper vowels and the higher pitched ones, the A, E, O, U, and E, I, U. However, if we are going to go by that's what I just mentioned, the A and E, that's the major vowel harmony. But if we're going to go through the minor vowel harmony, we would have to pick out these letters. Let me just get some colors. Nice. These ones. And if anyone has had difficulties seeing the letters, I will write them out now. The colors. We have and U. And here we have I. I and U. As in, a suffix will either, if it's a vowel, will either be one of the A or E, depending on which group we're in, or the U or I, U. We'll see that more in details right now in this lesson, actually. We will talk about the plurals towards the end, and we will actually see some usages of this. Now, there's another very important letter group. It's actually incredibly important, and many people don't actually realize the meaning behind it. So it's actually called fıstık şahap. Fıstıkçı şahap. As in, an anagram usually used by Turkish kids in school would be fıstıkçı şahap, which literally just means fıstıkçı, like fıstık means peanut, fıstıkçı, the peanut seller, kind of. Shahap is the name, so it's like Shahap, the peanut seller. That's like an anagram used in Turkish to remember these letters. Now, as for the meaning of these, we have. Let's put another group. Let me put B, V, and D. I'll pronounce these three letters. These were just random letters I just picked out. B, V, D. Okay? Now, in the same way that I pronounce these, can you please try to pronounce these letters? Okay? Okay. Let me try to do that now. S, t, k, ch, sh, p. Now, if you notice, these letters are quite silent. They just like, you whisper them, you're breathing them out. As in, they come out in a breath. There's not much vibration, unlike b, v, z, d, g. This is just like p, ch, sh, k, s, t, f. And that's important. Just like in the vowels we talked about, we want to try to keep the vowels next to one another. We also want to try and keep these letters next to one another. Because, once again, it's kind of hard putting a P next to a Z. Z. Yeah. In some languages, this is possible. But for most people, I'd say that, phonetically speaking, it's just kind of difficult to put this sound together. It will take a bit more effort than if we just, like, say, pch, or ch. Like, they sound, they match in a way. They're more harmonious. But there's something else very important. Let's put these letters. P. And we have, which letter was it? Let's take out the T and then Ch and then the K. Now, which letter sounds closest to the letter P? And I'm talking about any letter in the alphabet. Like, you can tell me Z if you want. What letter sounds closest to the letter P? P. Anything? You can take a hint from this. So some people, they cannot pronounce the letter P, and instead they pronounce this other letter. The letter is actually the letter B. P and B, P and B, they sound quite similar. Now, what letter do you think sounds closest to the letter T? Took a second? Okay. The letter is T, D. It sounds quite similar, the letter T and the letter D. And in some languages, like for example in Japanese, the letter P and B, they have the same hiragana symbols and katakana. You just add a small thing on top. Many languages do agree on the fact that P and B are quite similar letters, and also T and D. And we will actually see that in English in a bit. Next, we have the letter Ch. Now, don't pick from this group. Don't pick from the fıstıkçı şahap. What letter outside of the fıstıkçı şahap sounds closest to the letter Ch? Took a second? Okay. The letter is the letter J. Let me write that down. Ch, J. They sound in my opinion, most people's opinions, it does sound incredibly similar. Now, here's the interesting one. Now, what letter sounds closest to the letter K? Take a second. The closest letter to the letter K is the letter G. Now, here's something important. The letter G, or the letter G in Turkish, we can also have a soft G, yumuşak G. So put a slash here and write yumuşak G. So, what's the meaning of all this? Well, if we have a word, like let's start with the P. Kitap. Kitap means book. Now, what if we want to say his book? In that case, we're going to add a possession. And specifically, we're going to add a vowel. And the vowel is going to be this here. But we wouldn't say kitapı. No. It doesn't sound very nice. Instead, we'd look at these vowels that we made here, these P, T, Ch, K, and we would pick the alternative that is not in the fıstık shahab. And therefore, it would be kitabı. Okay? Now, let's do this for another one. Let's do this for the letter K. That's important. We're going to do 2 examples for the letter K for a specific reason. You see, by default, we kind of want to go with the yumuşak G rather than the G. So let me switch the order here. So let's start with the words yatak, which means bed. Yatak. Now let's say we want to say his bed. So it becomes yatak k. But we can't say yatak k. It just doesn't sound so great. An easier way to do it would be to change this to the yumuşak G, the soft G. So it would become yatağı. So basically, it's extending the A. The next letter, or next word, let's try renk. Renk means color. And what if we want to say his color, its color? Then, can we do this? If you're not sure, try to pronounce it. Okay? Have you tried? If you tried and you're convinced, then you should definitely check the first lesson in the series when I talk more about the individual letters pronunciations. Because there is no way you can pronounce this. Absolutely no way. The reason is, this yumuşak here, we talked about this being a vowel extender. As in, it needs to extend the vowel right in front of it. And there is no vowel right in front of it. We get stuck here. There's nothing to extend. It's literally an instruction to extend the vowel, but there is no vowel. So we're just like left blank. That is why we have to go the letter G. So instead, it would be rengi. Okay? Now, these letters here, they work both ways. Back and forth. What do I mean? Well, let's say we want to add a suffix that starts with a letter like the letter D. So, let's say da. It means at. We'll talk more about this later on. But if we want to use this suffix, so let's take the word kitap. Kitap. Now, if we add the suffix, it would be kitap da, right? That's not gonna work. That's not nice. We have a fistic shahab here, the P, and then we have a non-fistic shahab, the D. So we go back to our pairs, and we would see for the letter D, what's the combination? What's the alternative from the fistic shahab family? We have the letter T. So we come here, and say kitabta. I also want to point out that in other languages you can see this happen. For example, let's take in English, for example. Let's take the word sleep. And generally, the suffix would be something like sleep and then ed. That's the past tense. Now, can we say sleeped? It sounds terrible. And no one would say it. Instead, you would say slept, right? Oh, sorry. Let me just remove this one. Slept. Or let's take another word. Let's say cook. Another fistic shahab. Can we say cooked? That sounds terrible. Instead, we say cooked. Actually, even though we write cooked, we just don't say the letter D. We say the letter T instead. We say cooked. It never say cooked. So this actually applies. This is a very natural thing. Like these rules that I'm explaining, they may seem foreign, but they're actually incredibly natural and something that you yourself most probably know and are used to already. They're not new to you. It's just you didn't realize that they existed in your mind and in your vocal cords and so forth. So these are pretty much the rules for the back and forth fistic shahab. Now, yes, there are multiple exceptions, just like in any language, as in sometimes with short words, we sometimes decide not to change the P, T, Ch, and K from their fistic shahab to their non-fistic shahabs, as in the B, D, C, and G. This usually happens with very short words, especially because their meaning could get changed. Now, we talked, I think, quite extensively about the fistic shahab. And now I think it's time that we talk about the vowels, which are incredibly important. So we said we have the top row, the A, E, O, U, and the bottom row, E, I, E, U. So how does that work? Well, let's come back here. Let's take a word. Let's take bed. Again, the same word. Yatak. Let's say we want to make a plural. In the English language, we add the letter S. For example, bed becomes beds. Cat becomes cats. The alternative to this S is lar. That's what we add in Turkish. But it's lar or ler. So how do we decide which one? Simple. We look at the last letter. The last vowel, is an A. Yatak, lar. We're not going to have yatak, lar. You're just changing the sound. It just doesn't match. We want to keep the same sound. If it's deep, yatak, we will keep it deep, yatak, lar. How about if it was something else? Let's take a word from here. Renk. Renk means color, we said. When we add the plural, we won't say renk lar. It's just too off. We want to keep the same sound, the same pitch. So renk lar. Okay. How about, rather than the A and E, when do we use the other ones? The E, U, I, U. Well, this is something we will discuss more later on. But for now, I'll give it in a very simple manner. So when we want to say, for example, I saw a cat, it would be kedi gördüm. We'll talk more about verbs later on. This is not the topic of this specific lesson. And probably maybe in the next lesson. We have kedi gördüm, I saw a cat. What if we want to be specific and I want to say I saw the cat? Kedi yi gördüm. You see, we look at the last vowel. The Y is not something I wanted to use yet, but it just came out. We have the last vowel here is the E, and we go up to the pairs. Let me copy the pairs down there. We look at the pairs. In this case, we're just going to add the vowel. We look at the pairs, and we see that this E is in this pair. Which letter exactly do we have shaded in green? We have the letter E. So, kediyi gördüm. Let's take another thing. Let's take kitap, book. This is a loan word from another language. That's why we also have a bit of a mismatch in terms of the vowels. But it doesn't matter in terms of suffixes. We just focus on the last letter. So, let's say I saw a book. I just don't want to use too many different words right now. So, I saw a book. Kitap gördüm. What if I want to say I saw the book? Well, kitap. We're going to add the vowel. Look at the pairs. See this an A. So the pair would be this So kitabı. And once again, since we added a vowel, we look at our fıstık şahap pair here. And the P will change to a B. So kitabı gördüm. So this was a basic recap of the two vowel groups. And I think we can wrap this all up with one last but incredibly important note. And that is something that I did here. Here, after the E, I put a letter Y. This is a buffer. You see, in Turkish, we just don't have double vowels. If we were going to create a double vowel, we have to put a buffer in between. The buffers are, well, there are many actually. There are so many buffers actually, but the most common are N, Y, and S. I put this in this order because for many people this is easier to remember, as in New York State or something. Actually, no. So NYS. We either use an N or a Y or S. When do we use which? That actually changes a lot. But for the time being, let's remember it as in S will only be used in possession. And we will see that later on. And N is oftentimes used when we have multiple buffers in a row. Like, for example, we've added like 5 suffixes, and all of them for some reason have a vowel ending. So we keep adding those buffers. Well, around the time when we're adding the second or third buffer, we will almost always, let's say, use the letter N. Specific rules we'll get more into when we actually talk about the specific cases for it. But for the time being, for this lesson, what's important for you to maybe revise after this is just to understand here our fıstık şahap and the fact that these would have a suffix of a P, a T, Ch, and K, and that would of course sometimes change from P to a B if we have a vowel. If they are the suffix, the B or a D or a C or a G, we would reverse them if the word ends with a fıstık şahap. And then we have our vowels we talked about, and we talked about A, O, U, and these are the deeper ones, E, I, U. And I think that you should try to practice like the shape of your mouth, understand how to pronounce them, and change the shape of your mouth depending on which words. And if you get that right, your pronunciation would increase by like tenfolds. And hopefully, in the next lesson, we will now start to actually use these more and actually see more vocab and more sentences. So if you'd like to check out my next video, you can check out the playlist. And if you're looking for maybe getting some one-on-one tutoring, you can check out some of the tutors on the platform that I teach on. It's linked in the description box down below. And if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments down below.